And welcome back to the Code. Rich McKeegan, aka the Scarecrow, is with me from his lair again, back in Wethersfield. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing okay. It's like finally got some nice weather yesterday. We got out the house. We actually took a drive down to the shore and didn't get out of the car, but just drove around, and it was nice. Had the windows down. The kids were loving it. So that was a nice little rejuvenator. Kind of filled the batteries up for this week. And then back to the grind today. So schoolwork and wife working, but I'm excited for this. This always gives me a little bit of a boost and get to talk to some other people, which is it's always a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny too. We've been getting a lot of messages, and stuff like that from doing these podcasts. A lot of people are sending me messages saying thanks for doing some more of these because there's nothing else to do right now but listen to these things. And I know it's tough for people to be kind of kept up inside and not being able to do their normal lives, but there's also people out there that are dealing with this in a much different way. People that are kind of on the front lines every day, and whether it's doctors, nurses, first responders, dealing with this kind of thing all the time. And our guest today is one of those guys. So Eric Marandino, how are we doing today?
Not too bad, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you've been in the martial arts a long time, 30 plus years, the last probably 15, 16 in jiu-jitsu. And I know you're a second degree black belt, Team Link. Got some competitive experience. We want to talk to you about a bunch of things, but I want to start off first and foremost. You are an EMT in Hartford, I believe, and have been for many years. How is this whole thing going for you guys, and how are you handling it?
Yeah, it's stressful, as you can imagine. You see on TV and everything, they talk about the front lines and everything, the nurses and the doctors. But you got to remember that the EMTs, the paramedics, fire, and the police, when we get called for 911s and stuff in the city, we're actually the first point of contact with these patients before they even get to the hospital. It is pretty stressful because pretty much every call that we get now, we have to treat as COVID positive. It started out, we had certain precautions depending on what the calls are coming in and stuff, but it's pretty much progressed that we have to take those precautions on every call that we do now. So as far as that goes, yeah, it's been very stressful. The whole shortage with supplies and stuff, that was a scare for a little while. Luckily, it didn't really affect us. Our company's been great, and we've been able to deal with that and get all the the equipment and stuff that we need. So as far as that goes, it's definitely stressful, and it's a balancing act between work and then when you're out of work to try to kind of decompress from all of that.
Yeah, it is. And I still work. I'm not working full-time anymore in law enforcement. I retired from my full-time job, but I still work part-time. And I'm going out there a few days a week. And I've already dealt with people that were tested positive for COVID-19 and have died since then. So it is, for people that are stuck home, sitting, on the couch watching Netflix, it's hard to feel bad for them when they're complaining when guys like you are out there, seeing what you're seeing every day and put yourselves in harm's way. Not that you don't always do that anyways in your job, but now it just makes it that much harder because as I'm sure is the same in your jurisdiction, all the other stuff's not stopping. People are still having heart attacks. There's still, shootings. There's still other things happening that haven't gone on the wayside just because COVID's here. That didn't shut down with the government. Yeah.
So surprisingly, our normal 911 calls that we're used to, a lot of that has declined. The stuff that we would consider not necessarily emergency calls. People will call us for a stub toe or a toothache or different things to pick them up, go to the hospital. A lot of that has really declined because I think people are starting to understand that, going out, being in the hospital is the last place you want to be. People are going in otherwise healthy and, catching this and getting very, very sick. So when I see the protesters and everything like that, it's understandable. People are getting stir crazy. People want to start the economy. People want to go back to work. But they have to understand from our side of it, we see this stuff and this is what we're in every day, that this is pretty bad and has the potential to be very bad. So we just ask that everybody be a little bit more patient while things kind of subside a little bit.
Yeah. Now, what got you into the medical profession? What got you into being an EMT?
For me, it actually was a career change. I was in the dental industry for 30 plus years, and the economy tanked in 2008. I was self-employed before that for about 15 years. And when the economy tanked, I got wiped out almost overnight. So I was looking for something completely different. I was burned out in that field anyway. And it never really occurred to me to become an EMT or possibly go into medic. And I have a good friend of mine who's a physician. And he told me that before he ever went to medical school that he was an EMT. And he said it was the best, most fun job that he ever had. So it kind of got me interested. I did some research and, went to school for it and got hired at a great company. So I've been there ever since.
Oh, that's great. Now, with the martial arts, I know you've been in the martial arts a long, long time. How does that help your job, especially the jiu-jitsu training? Does it make you more? I mean, in my job in law enforcement, probably very similar, but more confident. Stress reduction. What does it do for you?
All of the above. Absolutely. The thing with what we do as far as being first responders, the possibility of a physical altercation, that's always there. But the way that dispatch is set up with police being on scene, fire being on scene, that's usually few and far between. So it's more to relieve stress. It's more to have situational awareness, scene safety. That's where all of my personal training has come into play. And that's where I see it when we get, people that are, 20 somethings that are brand new to the field coming in there that don't have any martial arts training. They don't have any situational awareness as far as, a gut feeling or, a scenario that could potentially turn south. So I think just, almost a lifetime of martial arts training, I'm just kind of always aware of where I am, what's around me, what's going on.
So right now, with how everything's going super stressful, it's like for all of us, like our biggest, de-stressor is jiu-jitsu. What are you doing right now in place of that? Or are you somehow training? Are you doing online stuff? At our academy, we've been doing a lot of virtual training. A lot of people we've talked to with academies have been trying to do that. So what are you doing in place of that right now?
Yeah, it's, I think as far as jiu-jitsu goes, all of us are in the same boat. Every academy across the country, across the world is pretty much in the same situation. So my coach started pretty early on doing webinars, every night. He does them in the morning for the morning classes and then at night for the night classes, Monday through Friday. And he does do solo drilling. We go over technique videos, rule sets, different things, discussions. So we do a lot of that. Unfortunately, where I live now in my house, I don't have a lot of floor space. So the solo drilling is kind of at a bare minimum right now. The weather's definitely getting nicer. So I'm trying to get out, hit the trails a little bit, do some hiking and stuff like that. The thing that's been a blessing for me is I bought a Peloton bike in January for my 50th birthday. So I mountain bike for about 20 years and I hadn't done that in a very long time. So I did that for myself before all of this hit, and I'm on that thing every day. So that's been my saving grace, to get in a good training session every day.
Nice. Now, I know it's like we've talked before, and you're a huge competitor. You've been competing for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, pretty much from day one, from white belt all the way up until my last tournament was the Miami Open in February of this year.
Now, are you going to go back to competing as soon as you can? Are you going to hold off for a little bit? What's your plan on that?
To be honest, I'm not really sure at the moment. The plan for this year was to compete as much as I can and get back to the World Championships. But right now, between work, being quarantined and everything like that, competing is really the last thing on my mind right now. I want to get back on the mats as much as everybody else does. My focus when I get back is going to be, back to the students, teaching, and being a student. I just want to train, bottom line. So as far as tournaments and stuff, that's always going to be there, just like jiu-jitsu is always going to be there. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not a priority at all. You know, it really isn't. So, am I done competing? I don't know. Will I be back? I really don't know at this point. The way I feel right now, it really is the last thing on my mind. You know, I know what goes into training at a high level, and right now I don't have the mental energy to even think about that. I just want to get to where this is past and we can get back onto the mats and get back to some type of normalcy.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, you mentioned, you know, what goes into getting ready to compete and stuff like that. I competed quite a bit, white, blue, purple, brown, but at black belt, I really haven't. And I've been a black belt a while now, it's going on 8 years. And, but for the same reasons you're almost mentioning, is back when I was doing that, I was working full time as a cop, and I was on a tactical team, and we didn't have light duty, and I was getting hurt more and more and more. And it was just becoming like, you know, I got kids and a family and everything else. And if I'm out of work because I popped my elbow in a tournament, you know, I can't go to my job. So I kind of held off and pushed it off for a while. But as Rich will tell you, the last probably 6 months, I was getting ready to go back into it. I was all registered IBJJ. I was actually going to go down to the Orlando Open and compete. And we had all our plans, hotels, everything. And then this thing hit. But I'd like to pick your brain and find out, especially in our age bracket, because I'm pushing 50 as well. What do you do for a training routine to get ready for these things?
It's funny because I talk to all the younger guys, and I'm sure you see it in your academy, that say, God, I'm tired, God, I'm getting old, God, I'm beat up, and all this. And it's like they have no idea what's to come, you know, down the road when you do get a little bit older. The number one thing above anything else, above training, drilling, eating, all that stuff, is rest and recuperation. It's tenfold more important than anything else once you start, you know, getting, you know, 50, somewhere around there. As far as training, it's all about drilling and conditioning. You know, the hard sparring and stuff like that really is not that big a percentage of what I did. You know, the biggest training camp I had was for Worlds last year. And that was 3.5 months long, which is ridiculous. But me and my main training partner, he was coming back off of an injury for a couple of years. I had a bunch of things going on. I hadn't competed in a while. So, you know, a full 4, 5, 6 weeks of that was just getting in, getting consistent, drilling, conditioning, to get to the point where we could have, you know, that last 6, 7 weeks of a hard push to really get ready and fine tune everything that we needed to do. So having training partners that you trust is very important, and changing the way that you train a little bit. You know, we're not 25 years old, like you said. We have full-time jobs and all that. Plus our bodies just don't heal the way that they do. Whether it's an injury or whether it's just from being worn out from training, we need extra recuperation time.
Yeah.
I've heard over the last, like, probably year, there's been a lot of conversation about the mental training. Emily Kwok wrote a really good blog about it. Mm-hmm. And just kind of seeing what your thoughts were on the mental side of the training as well.
Yeah, that absolutely is the toughest part. When we get older, the main thing is pushing yourself without breaking. You know, and the more you train, especially preparing for a tournament, when you start training a little bit harder, you got to figure out how hard you can push to get into the best shape you can be, but not, you know, break anything or break yourself down to where you can't compete. The mental part of it, where it really came into play for my training for Worlds last year, we were training and drilling so hard. It was the mental part was going home, recovering for a day, and then gearing up to come back to do it all over again, knowing how horrible it was, if I'm being honest. You know, I haven't, like you guys probably, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't been on the mats for 1 second where I didn't absolutely love it. You know, that's just me. The training that we did for Worlds was brutal in the fact that we pushed so hard. It wasn't so much the sparring part of it. And, you know, I just want to be clear with that, because we did do the sparring that we had to do, and you got to have hard sparring, but it was the intense drilling that we did. You know, you're pushing yourself to above and beyond what you think you can physically do. And that's where the mental part comes in. I
probably won't do it justice, but there was a podcast a while back, and Faraz Sahabi was explaining. I think it was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about, you know, training and, you know, that you don't necessarily have to train as hard as you think you do all the time, because all you're doing is tearing yourself apart. And then, like you just said, if you train so hard on say Monday, that you by Tuesday you're like, I'm so sore I can't even get out of bed. Yeah. You're not going to train Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you got to re-up and get yourself motivated to go through that all over again when you do heal. It's a very difficult mentally to do. Versus if you, I think you said like 70%, 60, 70, and I've had other black belts tell me this. You know, if you could train right around that 60 to 80% on a pretty much daily basis, and then once every week or two, really push it, so you don't forget what that pressure is like, that overall you're able to be more consistent and get more training in over time, like volume training. So that's actually something I've been trying to do, because for many years I was probably the type of person we just described. Like if I wasn't waking up the next day where I had to lower myself down to the toilet, that I figured I wasn't hard enough training, you know, and I would, you know, go too hard and injure myself or put myself in a position that I couldn't train the next day because I would just suffer it and go in there and do it anyways. And I wonder how much damage we've all done to ourselves doing that over the years, you know? So
absolutely. Yeah, like I said, the training camp I had for Worlds was a lot different. You know, we really put it together. We talked about what we needed to do, what we needed to work on, and mapped it out. And it really was 3 training sessions a week. You know, it was Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And when I say we trained hard, it was the drilling aspect. We drilled what we needed to drill and gave ourselves a full day of rest in between. And when I say we were like beat up and broken down, it wasn't from like when you do a hard night of sparring. You know, we go in there, we train with the young guys, do 4 or 5 rounds, and you feel like you got hit by a bus the next day. It wasn't so much that. It was we were drilling until we were depleted is what it came down to. You know, we were done and we know that we can't do another rep of anything that we're doing. That's what I'm talking about, like pushing the conditioning, pushing the drilling. And then when it got closer to tournament time, then we would do 1 day a week where we would do some hard sparring, you know, throw that in with there. But most of it was just working on timing and, you know, polishing up the techniques as far as that.
What weight class do you compete at normally?
Super heavyweight.
Super heavy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think who's in that bracket. Who have you faced that you've had a lot of fun with? who's been the one that you've sat there and all of a sudden you look at the brackets and you're like, shit. And it's like that's who you walk out onto the mats with.
To be honest, no big names, no world names that like everybody would kind of know. I'm going to be in Master 5 next year. So there are some big names, you know, that are going to be in there. Megaton, Marco Barbosa, like if I do the open class, that type of thing. You know, it's going to Worlds, going to Masters Worlds. That's an experience that I recommend to anybody. You know, just go do it. It's a who's who. It's the biggest tournament of the year. The Masters Worlds is the biggest tournament in IBJJF all year. And, you know, they have something like 4,000 competitors. So it's one of those, you know, I'd say once in a lifetime things, but I've been there 4 times. Hopefully I'll get back there at some point. And it's more about the experience than anything else. So I would recommend it.
A good
and I would
friend
also
of mine.
add that it brings your level up, just knowing that you're going to go and putting the work in. Even if you don't medal in something, you probably made yourself so much more better in preparation.
Absolutely. It's no different than progressing through the ranks in jiu-jitsu. It's about the journey. It's not so much about getting the belt or getting the championship or whatever. Do I want to win? Of course. You know, of course, everybody wants to do that. Get on the podium. That's what my goal, what my dream has been, is to get on the podium at Worlds. You know, it hasn't happened. It may never happen, but the preparation and stuff that we do, and, you know, last year in particular was, it's one of those life-changing events. You know, my main training partner, he's a super heavy. He's a brown belt. He won his 2nd world championship. His first one he won at purple like 4 years ago. So being able to train with him for 3.5 months, you know, 3 times a week, he being the main guy that I was working with, and then to see, you know, start to finish where that ended up, you know, on the podium for him, that was worth it for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. I mean, we gotta wait till this is all over. But as long as everything gets back to some normalcy, I definitely want to get out there and start doing it again. And I've very much strongly thought about going to Masters Worlds. I've never been there, so I think it's just, even if like I went out there and lost in 10 seconds, just to be able to know that I put myself on the stage and did it and tried, I think is important.
Well, that was like last year. A good friend of ours, Robert DeFranco. It's like he goes out and he competes every year. He's 51, and he walked out there, and one of his matches was against Megaton, and he had a great match. Really did well. Lost 5-0. Probably within the last like 45 seconds of the match, and it's like things just kind of didn't go his way. But he said he had an absolute blast out there. It was like that was, competing against him was something where it's like that was someone he looked up to before, and now he actually gets to compete against him, which was pretty awesome experience for him. Have you done any of the fight to wins or any of the other, like where they do the super matches?
The only one that I did was reality fighting at Mohegan Sun. I did one of the super fights down there in the cage. So that was a huge experience because I had, most of my team was there, friends, family, everybody. I think it was in front of 6,000 people. They call you out, get in front of there. So that was a huge experience for me. And again, it's about the challenge. It's about the preparation. That was an amazing experience too. And that's, I try to push myself and I try to put myself out there, win or lose. So, it's something I would recommend everybody to do at least once. Do you see the difference
of? Oh, go ahead, Rich.
The difference of training for the IBJJF, where you're competing against, an open bracket of who knows who, versus when you do a fight to win or the reality fighting, who you're up against. So it's like, do you modify your training to that exact person?
Yeah, I don't think it's modifying it so much to the exact person. I think the reality is it's all about conditioning. Conditioning is the one tangible that you can absolutely control. If you go in there knowing that you didn't put the work in, you got to hope that you get lucky in the first round, second round, and have quick matches. If you go in there and you do the work where you know that you can do 5 matches if they go the full time, that's a whole nother level of confidence that you can't really explain that to somebody until they've pushed and they've done the work to get to where that was. So that's
it's like when you're in school, you didn't study for the test, and you didn't, and you show up and they put it in front of you, and you don't know any of the answers. But when you really put the work in, you study, and you've studied so much that you're sick of looking at the book. You walk in and it's easy.
Absolutely. And I remember coming up through the ranks as a white, as a blue belt, and then probably halfway through purple belts. I had some success, competing and stuff like that. I love competing. But the bottom line with all of them, win or lose, was just being totally gassed and wiped out at the end of one match. So it was about halfway through purple belt where I really started taking training a lot more seriously, eating better, extra conditioning, drilling, like doing all those things. And that's completely paid off. And like I said, I keep going back to the training camp for Worlds last year, but that was a completely different level of training, and that's, you work that hard to get to that level. And the sad fact is it's literally a cliff at the other end of it. You get to that point and then it just drops right off as soon as you stop training.
You've been in the martial arts for close to 35 years. And what other arts have you studied besides jiu-jitsu?
I originally started in Taekwondo and Hapkido. We trained those together. What drew me to that in particular was my coach at the time. We did boxing and we did American kickboxing, full contact kickboxing. And that's specifically what I was looking for. At the time, there was a couple of other traditional schools that were around. They did all point sparring. And at the time, I was 14 when I started training. I knew I wanted to do full contact stuff. I wanted to, and it wasn't so much about learning how to fight. It was, I wanted to learn how to defend myself. And I looked at that as this is the most realistic thing that we had at the time. So that's where I started through there. Trained through there, got my black belt in both of those arts. And then from there, it progressed to Jeet Kune Do. And I did that for about 7 years. And again, all full contact, crazy, training, all impact oriented street fighting type stuff. And through that, my coach at the time, he had a lot of jiu-jitsu connections. So we did a lot of no-gi stuff. Well, not a lot of no-gi, but we did some stuff. And I really got drawn to that. And my first ever experience with jiu-jitsu was a Renzo Gracie seminar. So that was my introduction to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, was with Renzo Gracie. And I knew at that point, I have to find this, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So from there, and this was, years ago in Connecticut. I don't know if you're originally from Connecticut, but there just wasn't much, if any, jiu-jitsu here. So my main training partner at that time, he just did some research online, and he found my coach, Marco Alvin. At the time, it was the Marco Alvin Training Center in Ludlow, Mass. So we checked that out, and I've been with him ever since before it was Team Link.
Oh, no kidding. Now, with your Jeet Kune Do training, is that how you met Jerry Lashway, or how do you know Jerry? I think Jerry said he knows you.
Yeah, I knew him. He was one of the first people I met the first day ever going into a kickboxing class. So I've known Jerry 35 plus years. He was one of the original students back then.
Was he still nuts back then? I mean, he's one of my black belts. I love him to death. But.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We'll just say that.
He knows what I mean. I don't mean nuts bad,
No.
like in a good way. He's tons of energy, great guy.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget. I got a great story about him. It's got to be 05, maybe 04, 05. He had started training with us, and he wanted to do like a little class on like kind of Jeet Kune Do type stuff, and he wanted to incorporate some headbutting and stuff like that to show how to headbutt. And it was somebody in the class that was questioning the validity of being headbutt, and would it really hurt the person and not hurt both people? Because Jerry was saying, hey, you don't use your forehead, use top of your head. So Jerry, the guy was I think a motorcycle rider or something. So he had a helmet there with a face shield, and Jerry's like, oh, put your helmet on. The guy's like, what? Put your helmet on. He goes, I'll show you. So the guy put his helmet on, and Jerry headbutted him and knocked the dude out. And like Jerry was fine. I was like, this guy's crazy.
Yeah. No, he was a great training partner. We trained up through the ranks when we were doing Taekwondo, boxing, kickboxing. We used to beat the crap out of each other. And then I just lost touch with him for a bunch of years, and then kind of reconnected through jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, love Jerry, great guy. Now, I met you for the first time, I want to say you came to the first responder seminar that we did.
Last year. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to tell you, I was like, I don't ever really get nervous teaching those, but if I ever know there's a black belt in the class, I always feel like a little more added pressure. Like, wow, I got a black belt coming to my class. You know what I mean? But do you think that those kind of things are great for first responders, or do you think it could be anything done differently, or is there any kind of a program you think you could put together for EMS specific, or what did you think of the class?
I thought the class was awesome. Yeah, the way you guys formatted it, it was all very basic stuff, but it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It was easy to follow. For me, it was easy to follow because it's all pretty much stuff I had done before, but it's not stuff I had done in a very, very long time. My focus for the last 15 years has been sport jiu-jitsu. As far as first responders go, absolutely. I think some type of training is always going to be good. I think there's a lot of obstacles to overcome as far as that, because I actually looked into doing this a couple of years ago. I wanted to do something for my friends that were in EMS, for my company, for other companies, for people that I know that work at different places. The problem, which I think you'll agree with, is getting people to show up. Anything self-defense related, you can get 50 people that say, yeah, I'm going to be there. If you get 10 people, that's a big turnout, so that's the first thing, is getting them in the door. The second thing is repetition. It's all about training and actually doing this stuff. It's no different than buying a gun and then putting it in, your glove box and never taking it out until you have to use it. It doesn't work that way. So, as far as EMS goes, the stuff that you taught at your self-defense seminar, I thought was awesome, because I could see where it would easily be transitioned to implement for something like I do. Obviously, I'm not trying to handcuff somebody, but we do use soft restraints. We do have to immobilize people sometimes. I just think it would have to be done a little bit differently, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think I usually mention that as like, hey, we all have slightly different, missions, I guess. If I'm a police officer, my mission's a little different than a firefighter, which is different than a paramedic, which is different than maybe even like even within my profession, you could be a patrol officer or a plainclothes or a SWAT team. And even then the mission changes a little bit. You have the resources you have change, and the way you would actually perform might change. But I think I've had a lot of first responders want to come to the class before we opened it up to all first responders. Yeah. So that was one of the first ones we started to do with not just police. So and now what we're getting a lot of is psychiatric nurses. We're getting a lot of psychiatric nurses contacting us, wanting training, and they're working in an environment that is extremely difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big differences too, like for you as a police officer, going in there, it's like, okay, I need to immobilize them. I need to handcuff them. I need to do, what I need to do. For us as first responders, more often than not, I'm not going to say all the time, but more often than not, PD and fire are dispatched with us. We're usually second or third in line to make contact with a patient. So an aggressive attack or something like that, it's few and far between directly at us. But I think that would be more what needs to be addressed as far as training somebody in EMS. It's going to be more of like a blindside attack, like defending yourself, survive the situation before you try to immobilize the person. That type of stuff. The other thing too, while I'm thinking about it here, because I actually looked into it, I wanted to just do something for the people that I know, anybody who are interested, because a lot of people ask me like, hey, would you do a seminar and this and that? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to put something together. And then I had one of my supervisors actually asked me about doing it specifically for the company. And I was like, absolutely, I'd be happy to do that. So they checked into it. And I guess to do it through the company, their protocol would be I would have to be a certified EMS self-defense instructor, which I guess is a thing. I didn't know that was a thing. So they got me the information on it. And it was one of those things where it's $1,500 per person. They'll do 6 people minimum at a time. They'll fly out, they'll train at your gym for X amount of hours, certify you, and do all that stuff. So I found several things kind of wrong with that. Even if I were to do that and my company was going to pay to have me do that, it's a matter of getting people in who want to actually take a self-defense course or actually train or actually learn how to do this stuff. And that's always, I think, the hardest part doing any type of seminar, is getting people through the door.
Yeah. And if it's the same as law enforcement, there's so many, programs out there. I ran into that early on, when I first became a police officer in the late 90s, I'd already been training, and right out of the gate, we had a couple of situations where, I took somebody down and got them cuffed. And I remember bosses saying like, hey, you clearly know something we don't. Can you share that with us? And I started to look into it, and I got railroaded right out of the gates from, a lot of places like, oh no, you're not Academy certified. You're not doing techniques that the Academy approved of. And you had to teach whatever the techniques were that were taught in whatever class you went to. Like you're describing this class, they would come out and it was $1,500. I don't know what the class is, but most of the ones in law enforcement, they give you a specific range of techniques, and you have to do them the way that they taught you. And if you veer off course, then you're not, it's not acceptable, which is total BS. Because as well as I do, in real combat, whether in a sport or in real life, it's so vastly unpredictable. It's so rapidly evolving. You can't just say I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. It's got to be a reaction. Would you agree? I mean, it's impossible to teach somebody, 5 different specific things, and that's the only 5 things you can do.
No, I totally agree. And one thing you said at your seminar, which I really liked, because over the years, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of very, very bad self-defense seminars or things that were touted as self-defense. People come out of there with a false sense of security. And you said right out, this is 2-3 hours out of your day. If you don't do it again, then these techniques aren't going to help anybody. You've got to work these, you've got to go back to them, you got to drill them, and you got to make it so that it's second nature. And I think that's a lot of the times that these self-defense classes, they get pushed like that, and then people have a false sense of security, like, oh, I took a class 3 years ago for 2 hours. I'm going to remember how to do that if I get attacked. It doesn't work that way. I had a good friend of mine. He's also a black belt at Team Link. He was in the military and he was a recruiter. And when he was in there, they had a combatives instructor. And I guess the instructor literally took the course and got certified to be an instructor, but had never trained martial arts before. So my buddy got in there. He was already a black belt. And he tried to tell him, look, this isn't going to work, and there's a much better way to do it. And he had to go through so much red tape before they would realize, oh, somebody actually has a skill set that we can use. We need to change the criteria for who can teach this. So he ended up getting in there and teaching their combatives course.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. I remember it was probably, I want to say 99, 2000, right around there when I started trying to teach and kept getting shut down. And I remember even like early 2000s, like 02, 03, it wasn't until I brought some of these defensive tactics coaches from around the state and they came to my school and I said, come on down. I mean, I went to a class once at the academy and they were showing, whatever they were showing. And I know the big thing then was we don't want to go to the ground. We wouldn't choose to go to the ground. We don't do anything on the ground. We want to stay on our feet. And they didn't show every time someone in the class asked, well, what do you do if you get taken down? No, I just don't go to the ground. And I tried to explain to them, I'm like, listen, man, you can slip, you can fall, you can trip, you can get tangled up and fall over a coffee table. Who knows, right? But you could just have somebody that just picks you up and drops you on your ass. And you get taken down there against your will. If you don't know what to do, you're going to drown. Like, you're not going to magically learn in the moment. And even then, it was like in one ear and out the other. So I finally invited some of them. I said, come down to my academy. And they came down. I give them credit. They came down in 5 minutes of rolling is all it took. And they're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then from that point forward, it was much more, accepted. And I actually got to write the curriculum for the ground fighting for the whole state of Connecticut. And again, it's like you said, it's a taste test. They come in and they do however many days of it. It should be, those classes really should tell people, hey, I have a deficiency. I need to fix this deficiency. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days gave me a little bit of a head start. Now I got to go back and train consistently over a period of time with quality people that can show me the right way to really make a difference. Because otherwise, whatever you learn in those couple days, you're going to forget.
Wait a second. Was Eric at the training that we did where the guy actually said this wouldn't work?
Oh, he was.
The same seminar?
Yeah, it's funny because I saw him a few days ago. He's a great guy. I won't say his name, put him on the spot, but he's been in law enforcement for years. Big dude, real strong, weight trainer kind of guy. And he was, pretty adamant. He's like, yeah, this is cool, but I'm too big, I'm too strong. Like, I think like me, that kind of thing. And I've gotten to the point at my age where I used to be, when I was younger, I'd be like, oh, let's go right now. And I'm like, yeah, it ain't worth it. Whatever. I'm not going to change everybody's mind. But by probably halfway through the seminar, he was like, no, I want to feel it. I want to feel it. So I'm like, all right, you sure? Yep. So I rolled with him. How long was it, Rich?
Oh, 2 minutes at best. He was on the bottom the whole time. Couldn't get up. I thought he was going to puke because he couldn't breathe. He couldn't do anything. And he kind of had this like deer in the headlights look when Rob got off him. And he was like, okay. He's like, it's like the light bulb went off and he was like, wow, I get it. I get it now.
He walked off the mat and he left kind of quiet. 2 days later, he showed up at my school and signed up for a year. So nice.
It's the same when you get people who come in and want to be a cage fighter. And they say, I've got street experience. I've gotten in a million fights, this and that. It's like, all right, let's see if you can go more than 2 minutes on the ground. The rare occasion you get them, they're stuck on the ground for 2 minutes and they can't breathe. Most of them leave and they never come back. But every once in a while, you get that person where the light bulb does go off and they decide to sign up and start training and learn.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. What academy? Yours is in Ludlow? Where you train?
Our headquarters is in Ludlow. That's where I train mostly at, but we have schools all over New England. We have one in Utah, one in Miami, and then a bunch in Brazil. So I think he's got about 28 schools worldwide.
Now, do you teach there as well?
I teach at our headquarters, yeah.
I don't know if you'll know this guy. I don't think he's at the headquarters. Jason Patterson. Do you know Jason Patterson? He's
Yeah.
a brown belt.
Webster.
Yeah,
Yep,
Webster.
he's up in
I've
Webster.
known Jason since he was in high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we used to train Japanese jiu-jitsu and Goju-Ryu, Okinawan Goju-Ryu together many years ago.
Yeah,
and it's funny.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, myself, him, and another guy, Phil Weinman, who's in the Marine Corps. We all started back then in that, and then we all ended up becoming jiu-jitsu black belts years later. But yeah, it's kind of a small world the way it comes around.
Yeah,
So now,
no, definitely.
What do you like about teaching?
What do I like about teaching? It's probably the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life, to be honest. To be able to, first of all, to be in a position where I can teach. You know, I don't know about you, but when I started training jiu-jitsu, I was just happy that I found a place to train jiu-jitsu at the time. You know, and then trained really hard, got my blue belt, and then just kept pushing forward. And it's, you know, the thought of getting to a black belt, it was just one of those things that it's like, it just seems so far away, you know, to be able to progress through and then be able to actually start teaching, to, you know, to give back to the academy, to help people improve, you know, and not just in jiu-jitsu, in everything, you know, watch their confidence improve when, you know, when they start putting the stuff together and they start doing better, and you can just see people open up from that. You know, it's a very fulfilling thing, you know, and it's, as you know, it kind of bleeds into every other part of your life. You know, the longer you do this, it just becomes part of who you are.
Yeah. And I know Rich and I both, you know, Rich teaches a lot during the day. I teach, you know, sometimes during the day, a lot of night classes. And I'm sure Rich will agree, like getting that person that comes in that's like a little bit nervous to get on the mat and they're not quite sure. They've already emailed you 3 times and called 4 times, and you finally got them in there, and then you get them on the mat, you get their gi on, and in that first couple of classes, they're, you know, still kind of nervous. But as the days turn into weeks, and the weeks turn into months, and you start seeing them shrimp and bridge and roll and take people down, and they start, you know, applying the techniques, and then a new person comes in and they get to roll with that person after a few classes. They realize, wow, this all works. You see that confidence just build within them. It completely changes them.
Absolutely. And I always get newer white belts ask me, you know, coach, what can I do to improve? And it's like, consistency. You just need to be on the mat. And, you know, I don't sugarcoat it. I tell them, I'm like, your job as a new white belt for the next 3 or 4 months is to get beat up by the people who've been here longer than you. And I don't mean beat up by get hurt, get injured or anything. But the reality is people who have been here any length of time longer than you are going to be able to do stuff that you just can't do yet. So 3-4 months from now, when a new person walks into the gym and all of a sudden you're landing a sweep and you get that submission and you're able to control them, that's when you're going to see that this stuff actually works. You got to trust the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was always one of those irritating conversations as like a white and a blue belt. And I mean, even as a new purple belt, and it was like, how do I get better? And you'd have the black belt sit there, do jujitsu. It was like, shut up. It's such a dumb, stupid thing. And then after you finally get to that point of training for, you know, over a decade, and people ask you, now you're giving that same dumb answer, but it's 100% truth. It's like, get out there, do the reps, do the work. And it's like, you'll get better.
Yeah. And it's funny because you'll roll with them for a few minutes and then like, okay, coach, what do I need to work on? You need to work on everything. Trust me, in 5 or 10 years, you're going to get it.
Yeah. You know what I think? I always, I forgot where I heard this, but, you know, I use the example, jiu-jitsu is like a puzzle. And when you dump the pieces out of a puzzle, most people take the edges and put the edges together first, and it gives them a frame. And then they start being able to plug things in. And to me, jiu-jitsu is a massive puzzle, but it doesn't have edges. So like, you don't have that initial frame. You have to, because it shifts wherever you go, and you have to, it takes a while before it starts to make sense. But once it does, and you get that click, it kind of all of a sudden makes sense. You make jumps, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it was really great having you on. And when this is all settled and done, we got to get together and train sometime.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on. And, you know, that definitely, we got to train when this is all done.
And if I have another one of those seminars, first responder seminars, I'd love to have you as a coach. You know, I always invite other people. I don't want them to just listen to me all the time. I want people to come in that are from other lines of work, you know, or other agencies besides me and, you know, a couple of the other guys that train there, and bring them in and give them guys an opportunity to teach so they hear from other people. So if that's something you're interested in, we'd love to have you.
Absolutely. Just let me know.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot. Stay healthy. Stay safe.
All right,
Thanks,
man. I'll
Eric.
talk.
See you guys soon. We'll see.